Hi, I'm Jack Barrazzini, and you're listening to The Secrets of Stargate, where we talk about the hidden meanings and deeper layers found in the Stargate movies, TV series, and more. And joining me today are Jeff Haecker. Hello, Jeff.
Jack.
And Lisa Jones. Hi, Lisa.
Hey, Jack.
And Victor Lambs. Hey, Victor.
Hi, Jack.
Today we are discussing the 16th episode of Season 9 of Stargate SG-1, Off the Grid. SG-1 investigates an addictive space corn linked to the Lucian Alliance. Hijinks ensue, and they are captured by the corn plug after the Stargate is mysteriously harvested off the surface of the planet. General Landry interrogates Nerus, a husk of his former self after being denied his normal all-you-can-eat buffet, about the identity of who is stealing the Stargates. Through a maze of deflections, Landry is able to get to the kernel of the truth, Baal. SG-1, after being rescued by the newly launched Odyssey, are able to board Baal's ship and recover the pilfered Stargates. What are your thoughts?
That was amazing.
On this episode, Jeff? Try to fit as many corn puns in there as I could.
I got it. It was very corny.
Yes.
Yeah, this one. So when I saw the episode description, I said, "Oh, we're at the drug corn part of this part of the show," and I really didn't remember how much in this specific episode it was going to be, and I was actually pleasantly surprised because it was a very minor plot point. It was more about SG-1 chasing down Baal, which is always fun. I like that we got the Odyssey. I thought it had some good action and some good fighting going on Baal's ship. And it's always fun to see Baal, and especially how just evil he was with Nerus and not putting up with him, and just realized immediately taking him out, or not immediately, but pretty quickly taking him out when he realizes that he brought a virus on the ship. So, and yeah, Landry's interaction with Nerus, that was great as well. So, yeah, I mean, I was not the best episode, but I was pleasantly surprised with coming into it thinking it's about the drug corn, because I do believe we get more of that later in the show. So having that not be the central focus was a plus, and yeah, I thought it was an okay one.
We just get a taste of the drug corn here.
Yes.
What about you, Lisa?
I was really looking forward to more jonesing of the drug corn. It's always good to keep up with the Joneses. But I was a little disappointed it was just such a minor plot point. But you're right, Jeff. I think we get more corn later. It was fun. The episode was fun. I think that we're going to talk in detail about what was wrong with it. But on the
yeah.
But as a whole, it was engaging. It was entertaining. Just don't take it too seriously. We had Nerus, and then Baal is always fun, like these kinds of episodes, or Baal clone. And then you have the Lucian Alliance, which were a little more, they were better than last time. They were real goofballs when we first met them with Bala. So this kind of rehabilitates them a little bit. I will say I really liked SG-1's outfits, costumes this time. It was kind of fun to see them in something different. And actually the shoot 'em up scenes were pretty good. And you got a lot of corny Cameron Mitchell. Like they just let him do all of the farm, all of the corn, corn, what was it? Cornbread and black-eyed peas. And I mean, all of it. So it would have been better if Landry had served cornbread and black-eyed peas.
Yeah.
Nehru, instead of just cupcakes and
individually iced cakes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I say that next time I have cupcakes.
Yeah.
You got to sell
What
it.
about you, Victor? Yes.
Yeah, I didn't really remember this one, but I think I liked it overall. There's some, gaping plot holes, which the writer acknowledged on the commentary. The commentary was interesting because Alan McCullough, this was his third episode of SG-1 that he wrote coming in as a writer this season. But after he wrote it, normally Rob Cooper would do a pass on the script, but Rob Cooper was busy. So Brad Wright actually did a pass. And especially since Nerus was involved, he spent special attention on the General Landry and Nerus scene there. So a lot of that dialogue was Brad Wright's, just, rewriting that section of the script. There's some in-jokes with the writing staff as well that are kind of funny. Nerus's like final death line, he says like, "But I'm so interesting." And that was a reference to, when they were writing the episode in the writer's room and saying like, hey, well, we have to kill off Nerus because there's no way he could have made it off the mothership. Brad Wright said, no, you can't kill him. He's too interesting. And so when Rob Cooper did his final pass on the script, he added that line in at the end is like, but I'm so interesting, as an homage to Brad Wright's criticism in the writer's room. But I like it. Like I said, there's some plot holes. I don't like the 8 hours earlier, and then they replayed the exact same action scene again. I think that was unnecessary. But the Nerus scenes are an absolute delight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that part at the beginning there was very confusing because as I was watching it plays the same scene again. I was like, wait, did I check to see if my video had like skipped back? Like it just felt so unnecessary.
Yeah. I did the same thing and I fast forward through the credits and I missed the 8 hours earlier.
Oh yeah.
Blurb. Yeah. And then I'm like, why are they back on, like the gate's gone. And then, so I had to rewind it again to see if I missed an announcement of time, which I did.
Yeah, it was odd. This episode, it almost feels like they had part of a plot of one episode and then they wanted to throw in some other things and they just switch gears in the middle. Because the whole setup is like them investigating the Lucian Alliance and then the Stargate disappears just kind of out of nowhere. It seems like very conveniently that this just happens to happen while SG-1 is there when they're trying to get through it. And I don't think they really addressed that in the episode. But it almost felt like just had a grab bag of like ideas they just threw into an episode.
Mm-hmm. And like they didn't address how they escaped from the Lucian Alliance on the planet?
Yeah, so Cam Mitchell's being held, and they did acknowledge this on the commentary that their intent is that Cam Mitchell would be held like by one guy at a gunpoint, and then he would be able to overpower him and escape. And there was a line at the very end of the episode where he's trying to say, don't you want to know how I escaped from these people? And nobody wants to hear it at that point because they're so like tired. But then when they shot it, there were like 11 guys with guns pointing at him. And there was no way he could have escaped from that. And so 1 minute he's like tied up and like beaten up and has all these people around. And the next minute they're all running to the Stargate and they never answer how he escaped.
Again, I thought I missed something.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
They kind of hung a lantern on it at the end, but then they cut that line of dialogue at the very end.
Yeah. But then you realize it's not even about this first plot. And so you just move on to the next plot.
Yeah. And they needed to introduce the Odyssey in this one as well. So we get that thrown into the mix too.
And Baal stealing gate.
Yep.
Yes, for his off the grid network of Stargates.
He's on full prepper.
Yep. He's got his little mesh network of Stargates that aren't dependent upon any.
He's taken that, remember this is probably over 10 years ago, net neutrality was a big thing. And I feel like he's going the direction of anti-Stargate net neutrality. Going to charge you extra to get through your gate.
Can I clear up one thing? Or I was confused about something besides those things. Did we establish that Baal created the addiction corn?
No, I don't think that's created. That's the Lucian Alliance probably being drug dealers have bred that, or it was a native species that they bred. In the original version of the script, it was a banana. It was an addictive banana. But then they realized that in Vancouver, they really don't have banana fields, but they do have some corn fields that they could film at. And so they changed it to corn.
Corn works better. Okay, that's why I got lost again. I'm like, so who? They said it was created or lab. It wasn't natural, the addiction properties. But then I'm like, was that Baal? Was that Lucian Alliance? Like who? Okay.
That would be the Lucian Alliance, yeah, because they're kind of the crime syndicate. So they would introduce the heroin or the, fentanyl or whatever into the population to get people addicted.
But in this case, it's corn.
Yeah.
Yeah, Baal's looking to rebuild his own empire and hasn't really set up the, needing to get human planets involved, and he may not want to deal with humans.
But yeah, so I agree that he probably doesn't want to deal with humans. He's trying to just rebuild his own little enclave there, the best he can. So,
yeah, I like when they're planning out to go undercover to investigate the drug corn. Cameron introduces himself as Shaft, Mr. Shaft.
Mr. Shaft.
Just hamming it up the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was a callback to his call sign Shaft, in one of the earlier episodes. And then of course the drug dealer keeps thinking his first name is Mr., so we get, hilarious hijinks there too.
Oh yeah.
As well.
So it wasn't a Shaft joke, like the 1970s.
No, that's what it's a reference to. I don't think he ever says like, "Can you dig it?" or something. But that was conscious on their part that his call sign, was a reference to, John Shaft, the black exploitation hero or anti-hero.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
And then they all.
He also called himself Shaft. That was like one of his nicknames in the military. I think like Cam Shaft or something like that. So.
Yeah, that's right.
And then they all have to argue about who makes the best undercover drug dealer, who's believable. Which was it was again, it's awkward, it's weird, but it's fun. Like if you just let it go, it's cute and it's fun. It's that team interaction and they I think Carter gets called Mary Poppins.
Yeah,
that right?
was a Brad Wright addition to the script, I think.
And she gets this little hurt look on her face. And I don't think he called Teal'c and Daniel Jackson anything, though.
No.
Because at one point, they all ask Teal'c which one of those three would be the best undercover, like, drug dealer. And he's like, none of you guys are
He said you're all equidistant from it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was good.
I just want to know why they chose corn.
Because they had cornfields to shoot on. Yeah.
Just from a in-universe explanation reason, corn is already one of those staple crops that a crime syndicate would probably want to control the flow of. They didn't need to make it addictive. So I wonder why they decided to make it addictive corn rather than an actual drug or something like that.
Yeah. I think the original kind of genesis of this episode was Rob Cooper, I believe, had an idea for what if the Lucian Alliance is growing an addictive crop? And then they kind of just ran with that. And then they needed to work the Odyssey in. And in the initial draft, it wasn't even really Baal who was the system lord stealing Stargates. It was just going to be a random Goa'uld. But then they said, no, it has to be pretty much Baal at this point because he's the only one left. And
yeah.
And we got a lot of them.
Yes, you got 12 of them, right?
It's not even the original Baal.
Yep.
No, a lot of balls too, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
The real highlight of this episode, of course, is the feast scene with General Landry and Nerus, of course.
Yeah.
Which is, it's kind of like the Silence of the Lambs where you have to ask, the horrible criminal, for insight into, the even more horrible criminal type thing. But in this case, instead of it being like this mental battle of wits, it's just a battle of appetites and stuff. And so it's a, delightful scenes there. Yeah.
And I like the fact that Landry doesn't get taken in by him and believe him. That was really nice, but he's in control the whole time, but you don't know that.
Yeah. I like that. He knows how to play him and he played him like a fiddle.
Yeah. We get some good callbacks to the, I want more chicken scene from Beachhead. He gets, turkey and he, plays it up. He's like, more turkey, just hamming it up, in this one. And I guess Maury Chaykin, like whenever they would do another take, he'd do it slightly different or ad lib something differently. So I don't think those outtakes exist anywhere, but they would be a lot of fun to see.
I was going to say, I'm sad that we're not going to see him again because he was just so much fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm very sad about that too. They were, even on the commentary, they were saying, well, maybe he could have used an escape pod or something but yeah, the most controversial thing about that scene was, and I don't know whose idea this was, if it was Peter DeLuise who directed it, but it wasn't in the script, but towards the end of the feast, the bars are like all smeared with food, and it's really disgusting. It looks like, Mr. Creosote from Monty Python when he blows up from eating too much and it's, there's just food everywhere. and they shot it that way. And then, the showrunners and the writer were watching the dailies and they're like, this is horrible. This isn't what we had in mind at all. This is disgusting. Why is there food everywhere? And so they were even talking at one point about, well, they couldn't reshoot it because, they didn't have Maury Chaykin for that long. And they were like, well, do we digitally edit, like paint over the food on the bars, And so what they did is they tried to cut around it. They used like close-up shots instead of wide shots. So, it was a decision made on set on the day. The cinematographer or lighting director, who was also on the commentary, seemed to recall that they had filmed it both ways, with the food on the bars and without the food on the bars. But the only, version that the people in the editing room saw was the version with the food all over the place. And so it is unnecessary. And you're like, whose idea was that? But they couldn't do anything about it to fix it, really.
It would have been funny if they had a scene where you actually see him eating.
Yeah.
And tearing up.
Yeah. And just food going everywhere, like the Tasmanian devil or something.
Yeah.
Well, and he's got food all over his mouth, too. Especially at the end.
Yeah, when he gets back to Baal.
I like that.
Yeah. He has his little cupcake frosting on his face. Yeah.
It just made him all the more pathetic. I liked it.
Yeah. Fits with his character.
Yeah.
Maybe they were doing like a Hook style food fight.
Yeah. And so, we get Maury Chaykin speaking, because when he's around humans, he doesn't use the Goa'uld voice. And so then they filmed the scenes with Baal and him, which are two very dialogue heavy scenes. There's a lot of talking between them. And then, so they filmed it, without the effect, of course, and it worked great. But then they got into the, post-production, and they're like, well, if it's two Goa'ulds talking in front of Jaffa, they would have to have the flanger effect on their voice. And I think for Nerus, it just completely wrecks his character, because he just sounds like a really weird, it just sounds really weird. And there's a lot of talking in those two scenes. And so they were trying to just in any sort of way justify them not using the Goa'uld voice effect, but they had to pretty much use it. And to the detriment, I think, of some of the dialogue there.
Yeah, the Goa'uld voice is very silly when you think about it, but in the context of the show, it's fun.
Yeah. The other in-joke from the writing circle was when the Lucian Alliance guy is beamed up by the main Lucian Alliance guy, whose name I forget, but the first question the boss asks him is like, what were you thinking? And I guess that's whenever one of the producers fires somebody from Stargate, that's like the question they ask is like, what were you thinking? And that's the sign that person's about to get fired. And so they kind of worked that into the script. And he's like, you're not going to kill me. He's like, why would I kill you? He's like, well, every time you say that to someone else. So, yeah.
Nice. I wonder if the producers took kindly to that joke.
Oh, I'm sure they did. Yeah. They working that in.
Yeah. And we get to see the Odyssey, which is fun.
Yeah.
Right after we blew up our previous ship.
That's a little fast, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And they just throw in a line. It's like, how's your shakedown cruise going? And you're like, what?
Yeah.
I guess we have the Odyssey now.
Yeah. That was kind of convenient. I mean, we just lost Prometheus, and then the next episode is the next episode, isn't it? Wasn't that just last
time? Yeah, it is
the
next episode, yeah.
Oh, we have a new one and a new, kernel and everything, and it's fine. We don't.
And I assume they reused a lot of the sets.
Mm-hmm.
That was the whole, I think you may have missed this, but last episode, but the whole reason they blew up the Prometheus was because they didn't want to take up studio space for a different ship set. So they just reused the Daedalus sets now for the Odyssey and the George Hammond, which comes later, and some of the other ships that they have. There's like a Russian version too. So they just use the same set for all those different ships, and they don't have to build extra sets.
But why did I'm just wondering, why would they need to have destroyed the Daedalus then, if they're still using the sets anyways?
Or the Prometheus? They didn't destroy the Daedalus.
Sorry, Prometheus.
Storage.
Well, because the Prometheus was a different set. Like the interior of the Prometheus was different. So now that you have the Odyssey, it's the same set as the Daedalus and the other ships that we'll see.
So
the Daedalus class.
It frees up space, right?
Yeah.
Shooting space, so they don't have to store it and everything else.
Yeah, it's cost, and they can use the studio for something else.
Go over to Prop Store, see if they sold any of it.
Oh, I'm sure they did. They sold a lot of Stargate props in the 2010 era. You could have gotten like a little replicator block for like $60. I almost bought one of those, but
nope.
Yeah.
Not in my house.
Yeah.
You buy one, then you get more.
That's
yeah,
right.
exactly. It's the ultimate multi-level marketing scheme.
Exactly.
Infinite replicator blocks. But they did make a reference. They didn't make a reference to the Prometheus, but they made a reference to the previous episode with, after that episode, after that thing happened last episode, now we're implanting the locator beacons
Mhm.
instead of having them wear it. So you had
It did.
mentioned that, Jeff, that they start implanting them now,
Yeah.
which the writers acknowledged caused them all sorts of problems because, with the Asgard beaming technology, you could just beam them out anywhere, anytime. And so now they have to come up with all sorts of reasons for why the beam won't work. Why they can't just beam SG-1 out of trouble every time.
Point.
Shields.
Yeah,
Shields are up.
shields, atmospheric interference. Yeah, they're jamming us or whatever. Yeah. But
It's the same
yeah,
issue
I think,
that Star Trek runs into.
yeah,
You got to come up with all the reasons.
I think Joseph Malazzi on X probably by the time this airs, a month or so ago, had a question like what, technology was most detrimental to Stargate. And someone said Asgard beaming technology because you could just, boom people out whenever you wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Only if you can get the ship there fast enough.
'Cause
That's true.
Because
that's-
that was an issue here.
Was it though? Because they said we're 22 hours away. And so it's daylight. They're being punched. And so they have some bruises on their face. It's like, we'll get there in 22 hours. And then when they're beamed up, they're still it's still daylight. They're still sitting there and they still have, maybe a few more bruises on their face. So did they just punch them twice and then leave them alone for a day and then come back and punch them again? Or
They had to sleep, right?
I guess so. Yeah. Punching people can be exhausting, I guess.
I thought they were going to try. I couldn't remember, but I thought
Yeah,
they were going to
they,
maybe try to addict them to the corn or something. And
Yeah.
then they have to do they have to deal with that, but they didn't.
I was waiting for Kevin Mitchell when he was being all cutesy, I want to get some corn, for him to grab it, grab an ear and start gnawing on it or something, but he didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was chewing on one
No, they
plant
didn't
when
really-
they first got there. I was like, "Are you sure that's a good
I think
idea?"
it was
You
like
don't
a
know.
hayseed or something. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, but I was like,
Yeah.
they could have modified something else. You don't know.
Yeah.
But they didn't seem to worry about that kind of stuff.
Mm-mm.
Anyways,
Yeah, they didn't really convey that passage of time at all. It's just kind
Yeah.
of everything moves at the speed of plot.
Yep. But the Odyssey is in pretty good shape. It might have shields, but it has weapons. So we're not back to, we don't have hyperdrives. We
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
they're being installed next Tuesday or something like the Enterprise B. But
All right, where they say we don't, what was it? Their shields don't work. They don't want to get in a fight. I mean, the ship's ready, but it's not ready. It's only been done in simulations or something. And so,
yeah,
shields, yeah.
Yeah,
only
so-
simulated.
why don't we jump in the middle of the Lucian Alliance firing on Baal and test it all out right now?
Yeah.
yeah, that was another weird thing. I get that they were trying to, so the Lucian Alliance somehow also tracks Baal. And, at this point, it's revealed that not only has Landry put a locator beacon in a subspace locator beacon so they can track them anywhere in the galaxy, which is the technology that is very helpful to have. I guess if every SG team had that, they wouldn't need to search for them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And put it in a piece of cake, which Nerus ate. Although, so it was a piece of cake. Wink. But
Yeah.
yeah, and that was another, I guess, thing on the message boards at the time was there was a big discussion about, did Nerus eat the cake so the locator beacon was in him, or was it just in one of the cakes that he brought? But the intent of the writers is that Nerus ate the cake that had the locator beacon in it.
That's how I took it.
Yeah.
I would assume that they have him held prisoner. Can't they just hold him down and inject it into him?
But they don't want him to know that he's being
Yeah.
tracked.
That's true.
Because he thinks he got away scot-free, remember? Because he gave up the coordinates.
Yeah.
So
It gives you a limited amount of time to track him, though.
yeah.
Depending on what the waste reclamation facilities on a Goa'uld mothership are like.
That's what I was like, you only got a certain amount of time here.
Yeah. Hopefully all that cheese, slowed things down a little bit, but but yeah, and so Landry, is I like Landry's response where they're like, "Well, do you want to try the coordinates that Nerus gave us?" He's like, "Oh no, it probably connects to a black hole or worse." We won't even bother trying it.
I was happy with that. I was afraid. I'd forgotten about this, and I was afraid Landry was like, "Oh, it's okay, we got the coordinates," and so when he told Walter like, "No, we're not going to do it," I was like, "Oh, good for you!" Like, finally, something makes sense.
Yeah.
But they also implanted viruses on his technology too. Nerus's technology. Yeah.
Just a little virus. Nothing major.
Just a little virus. Yeah.
But wasn't that the best? With Baal's like, coming in, we've lost shields, this and that, and he's like, "Oh, it's just," and he's on the computer like, "I'll get it fixed in a jiffy,"
Yeah.
with the cake on his face.
Yeah.
He's been put into the role of the sad IT guy.
Yeah.
I like when Baal's pointing the staff at him. He's like, "Oh, you don't have to shoot it," and then Baal just slowly pivots to aim at him.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's where we get the "but I'm so interesting" line.
But we did not see him actually die, so
No, it's
show me the body rule applies. He might still be out there.
Yeah. I believe the actor has since passed on, but
He has, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, like 15 years ago.
Mhm.
Yeah. But so the virus lowers the shield and disables the mothership, and the Odyssey shows up, and SG-1 beams over, and there's a huge firefight on the ship. Teal gets to do his whole like pointing the the machine guns in different directions, and
That was cool.
That was
yeah,
Yeah. Teal getting to go full action hero.
Mhm.
Probably the
Yeah.
highlight of the episode. There is something funny that I noticed in there is when they're running through all those corridors on Baal's ship, you can see like there's like grates on the wall, and there's also what look like windows, but they just have like blue coming through them, like blue backgrounds. And I was wondering were they intending to like was that like masking and they were intending to put something else there, or was it supposed to just be blue?
it was just supposed to be blue. I think they didn't do the Star Trek Insurrection.
That's
thing
what I was
where,
thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah, where the final fight between Picard and the main bad guy there, they if you look on that little weapon station or whatever they're fighting on, all the backgrounds are blue, and they just didn't have the money or the time to put the backgrounds in. And so
Yeah. It's exactly what I was thinking of when I was watching. I was like, were they supposed to like mat in some like space out there or stars, and they just didn't?
No, they're very conscious about that. When they're they can now do rear projection for the star fields on the Daedalus and the Odyssey now, so you don't have to digitally put those in. A lot of that is just rear projection of the hyperspace effect or the star fields. So it's actually
that's cool.
On the and but our 12-year-old was very upset by all the torches on the Goa'uld mothership. He's like, "That's just using up all your oxygen. It's very inefficient." I was like, "Well, maybe
they've had those since the beginning."
I know. I was like,
Yeah.
maybe they're like holographic torches. But he's like, "Well, they just lost power. How would they have holographic torches if they lost power?" I was like, "Okay, so they are real torches using
That's
up all their
awesome.
oxygen on the ship." Yeah,
He's a true sci-fi nerd.
yeah,
Picking up on things like that. That's amazing.
yeah.
Yeah, and then we get they're able to slap all their trackers on the giant, like it looks like someone's like garden shed, basically just full of Stargates.
Yeah.
Beam them out.
That was such a random, like plot device thing that he's going around beaming up all of the Stargates and DHDs. It was kind of fun. It was kind of random to me. I just wonder, is that another one of those plot threads that's been sitting around for years? And they're like, we haven't done yet,
I don't know.
Yeah.
Because I feel like we've gotten a lot of those this season, They're sitting in the writer's room going, okay, who all had ideas we haven't used yet? Okay, go. How can we mash it all together in this season?
And it's funny because then Earth goes and does the same thing where they go harvest gates for something. So I can't remember if they reference that like, oh, Baal had an interesting idea of harvesting gates
and reprogramming them or whatever. Yeah. But that scene was kind of interesting because they really only have like the one full Stargate prop that they use in the field, and then they have like a quarter or a half, Stargate that they can use for close-ups. So when Sam's running around like tagging all the gates, it's just the same, quarter of a Stargate that they put in different positions all over the place. Yeah.
Had to take a while to shoot then.
Yeah.
She runs over, tags that, and they're like, cut. Okay, move it around.
Yeah. And then they run out of locator beacons, so then they have to beam over another bag of locator beacons. So
yes, it was a very it's almost like a Looney Tunes plot. Like things just keep happening and keep going wrong, but the progression of what's going on doesn't follow logically. It just things just keep happening.
Mm-hmm.
It does have kind of like dream or cartoon logic. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I did not look who wrote, but it's
Alan
not one
McCullough,
of our. So not one of our usuals.
No, he was a new writer. I think this was his third episode, and he becomes. I think he's also the new story editor, and he writes more episodes through the next couple of seasons.
I guess that makes more sense then.
Yeah,
that it wasn't quite.
Yeah, it looks like he writes
the same.
5 in season 10, and he wrote a handful for seasons 4 and 5 of Atlantis. So,
yep. Cool. So Baal's ship with the clones on it, at least 3 clones, I think, are blown up. And, the Earth vessel Odyssey attacks the Lucian Alliance ships, which they probably won't appreciate going forward. But then they hyperspace back, and SG-1 escapes when Sam, in nick of time, we don't get to see this either, reprograms the DHD to dial the Earth gate.
Yeah.
Or does a sync command between the DHD and whatever Stargate is left, I guess. So
that was kind of neat because it gave you kind of a callback to, I think they did that, this Daniel Jackson did at the season finale of season 1, maybe?
Yeah.
Where he was trapped on the Goa'uld ship. I mean, we've seen it done a few times, but I liked that because you're sitting there with a whole bunch of Stargates around you and the foremost expert on Stargate.
Yep.
And DHDs. So, yeah.
She didn't do what I've always wanted them to do, which is put an active Stargate through another Stargate and see what happens. Still waiting for that.
Yeah.
I don't know if they could, though, because of the origin point. So
they could have
been using.
Yeah. Don't break my dreams.
I mean, they could come up with a reason.
Or they could figure out a way to update that sucker.
So did they give all the Stargates back to the planets they were stolen from, or are they just?
I don't know how they could.
How do you? Yeah.
Probably they don't give it back to the corn planet, I would imagine. But
here you go.
True.
Yeah.
So I was reading online. Someone suggested that these were the gates that they later use for their other project. So, or some of the gates they use. So, and I don't know if it's official anywhere or if it's just speculation.
It could be, yeah, because they do harvest some additional gates, but they need a lot for that project.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to find out about that later.
Yeah.
We don't want to spoil
I don't know what y'all are talking about.
No, we don't. Yeah.
Awesome. Do we have any alternate language titles for this episode?
Yeah, we did have some interesting ones because Off the Grid is kind of an idiom in American English.
Mm-hmm.
In French, we get hors limite or off limit. In Italian, we get un souvenir per Nerus, which is a souvenir for Nerus, which I guess is the cake maybe, or the virus. In German, we get das verschwundene Stargate, which is the missing Stargate. And then in Japanese, we get Kaito SG-1, which is Phantom Thieves SG-1.
Oh.
Yeah. That sounds in my head like some kind of awesome, like mid-90s Stargate anime that never got
Yeah.
made.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Awesome. Did y'all have any other thoughts about this episode?
I will say that so I watched it with my youngest daughter who's home from college, and after it was over, we enjoyed it. But she was very much like, "Can we watch another Stargate episode?" So we did what we call we call Stargate Roulette, which is where she just gives me a season and then any number between 1 and 22ish, and then we go and see what episode that is, and then we watch it. So we did that a few times. So it was kind of fun. So we went all the way back to season 2 and then season 4 and 5. So it was kind of fun. We enjoyed this one, but it did leave us a little wanting more.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is definitely a head scratching episode, just in the way it was put together.
Well, from what I remember, the next SG-1 is also very head scratching.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
And then we finally kind of get to the final, toward the end of the season, and it kind of picks back up with the main storyline. So,
But yeah, I think we have one
That means
more,
the
and then
Ori
the
are
last
coming back.
3 are all together.
yeah.
Well, at least we only had a passing mention of the Ori, because we're about
That's
to go
true,
full
yeah.
Ori in a couple episodes, right? Or ancient. They just had
Yeah.
the passing.
That is a positive. No Ori. Awesome. Well, before we go, we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Stargate, including Julia K., Martin R., Patricia V., David L., and Sindel T. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Stargate and all the shows at StarQuest. And you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. And be sure to follow the show on Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and you can find our video versions at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia. And to find previous episodes of Secrets of Stargate and to send feedback, please visit sqpn.com/Stargate. And you can email us at stargate@sqpn.com and follow StarQuest on social media at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia or on X at SQPN. And be sure to check out the SQPN Discord at sqpn.com/Discord. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the next episode of Stargate Atlantis, The Long Goodbye. Until then, Jeff Haecker, thank you for joining us and sharing the secrets of Stargate.
It's Jack.
And Lisa Jones, thank you as well.
Thanks, Jack.
And Victor Lambs, thank you too.
Thanks, Jack, and we are indeed suitably employed.
That's the least we can say about that.
Yeah.
And once again, I'm Jack Barrazzini. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Stargate on Star. I'm going to go get me some corn.
Anyway, I'm sorry, but that just happens to be how I feel about it. What do you think?